Okay, everyone. I wanted to talk about a few things, and I'm going to bring up 10 years ago, and we'll start with the good and the positives of 10 years ago. And one of the things that I was doing 10 years ago was that was the first time I had ever played online gaming. And, I had read about it in magazines, and they would always say, like, I just remember people talking about Perfect Dark and Madden and things like that, and they would say, and Splinter Cell, and they would always say, "Oh, this game is bomb with 4 people," and it was the problem with it was that nobody ever wanted to play those games. It would be like it just people would say, don't really want to play that. I did play Baldur's Gate or something like that, but I didn't quite get to the point of playing like Splinter Cell because it just happened to be one of those games that just had too much depth. And that's kind of the way it was, when I was in school. I mean, those types of games were, I mean, it was just a very meme infested thing. I don't know if it's still like that today, but probably is. But just, if it doesn't have like a popular phrase with it, it probably wasn't played. And so, it was just difficult trying to play these games. And, speaking of which, it's still kind of like that because, the Xbox One, that, I mean, I'm just gonna let you know, like, if you have an Xbox One, I don't know if I'm the only person, but it's just been really atrocious right now. I've had it for about a week and a half, and it just, it really doesn't do anything because, I mean, the updates are just bad. Like, if you're gonna get one, just be prepared to wait like a full day if you want to play Halo or anything. Like, these updates are bad. I mean, you start off with a terabyte of space, and a week later you have 500 gigabytes because I own 3 games and they take up that much space. I mean, it is ingratiating. And like, I think Microsoft really needs to kind of work this, or they're not going to get sales in the future. But like, that's the way it was. I mean, really, I don't have a problem with not being able to play these games. I mean, I'm not going to stick up for Splinter Cell because I've actually never played it. But like, when I read about it and then they say, well, this is one of the best games of the year, it makes you wonder. I mean, it happens. Editorials are very different from public ear, and that's just the way it's always been. Like, I don't know why that is, but when you look at it, like, people who are critics will always have a different opinion than those on like ground level. And so even though Metroid Prime would get like a 10 or so, the amount of people that actually cared about it was probably, I'd probably give it like a 3 out of 10 when it came to people that have talked about the game. So I mean, that was just one thing, dealing with. I got both sides of the spectrum because I liked magazines, and so I would get both opinions. On one hand, people would say, "Well, yeah, I like this game," but then when you bring it up at school, nobody said that they liked it. So you just had to kind of pick and choose, and I mean, that was just, I mean, it was a topic when you concern that with video games, but then again, it was probably the same. I'm guessing that it was the same way for music and movies too. I mean, I swear it probably was. Especially considering if you're like 14, 15, and you just go through it and say, well, hey, does anyone like this? And people are like, fuck no. I mean, it's just, that's one thing. So that's what I was dealing with 10 years ago. But, of course, I said, I don't care if people like this, I'm going to fucking play it. And so the very first game I ever played online was Guilty Gear for the Xbox. I had a friend, and that fall 2004, he got the game. And so we played that, and I briefly played, I probably played it like 1 or 2 times, and I just said, forget it, I want to play Halo. And so I played the game, and it was just different because looking back 10 years ago, I actually talked to people on Xbox Live, and now I almost never do it. And it just, I guess it just happens to be a little bit more of like, shyness. I don't know what it is, but I had the headset and I would talk to them, and it just was, it was good moments. I mean, the first thing, if you're wondering, like the first thing I ever played on Xbox Live, it was Big Team Battle. And I remember the very first map that I played on was Waterworks. And I think I lost that game. I don't remember that much, but that was pretty much what I played. And so I just went through it at the time. But, you know, that was like a major thing. And I had quite a few Xbox games. And the thing about it was the Xbox was, you know, going out of popularity by that point. I mean, 2004 was just in the sense of saying, well, that, you know, you could just, because it, you know, you've had the machine for 3-4 years, and, you know, it's just like, okay, it's, people are already thinking of the new thing. I mean, that's just the way it is, you know. Once you've had something for 3 years, it's kind of like it's time to change. The only thing I really feel that should be like that is shoes, and probably perfume. You know, like women, if you're still using the same perfume 3 years later, you need to get a new one. But I don't think you should have to, and you know, car CDs, that's another thing. But, you know, if you've got a shirt and you've only worn it 5 times in the past 4 years, well, wear it. I know there's obsessive compulsive people out there and just all sorts of things to which what you do, but I mean, that's just the thing. With the Xbox was kind of, you know, I really only needed Halo, but I ended up playing it, and I remember I had a couple other games. I think it was Forza, something like that. I had a driving game. I had Prince of Persia and Knights of the Old Republic, Star Wars. And that game, I'm going to talk about that because when I read about it, this is one of those games that I'm talking about that people said probably not. Now, my biggest problem was it was hard for me to actually pick up on that, you know, when I was 15, because, you know, you just had to say, well, what were people talking about? I don't remember there being like websites that would say this is the most popular, you know, Xbox game. So I guess, you know, there were charts in there, but it still felt like it was something different. I mean, it's just hard to really mask those trends. So unmask those trends. So, you know, there was that, but really what I ended up doing was, I mean, it was pretty much Halo, and I did it at that time. And the summer of that year, really, I don't necessarily remember what went through my mind, but really, I was watching music videos pretty much that whole summer. I mean, I remember the "We All Float On" song and things like that. I would just, you know, I'd be up till like 2-3 o'clock in the morning just watching things. And I know you're saying, well, geez, you were 15. I know, like, really, but the thing is just for some reason when it was 10 years ago, I still had it in my head that school was important. And that was kind of the thing. I mean, when you look at it, you know, 10 years ago, you got to say, well, fuck, man, just live. That's the thing. I mean, you got to knock those things out of your head. I mean, it's like, you know, some people had that 10 years ago, and it was like, fuck, man, I'm going to pull like an all-nighter. I'm going to go and get some alcohol, and I'm going to, you know, spend the night and sleep on someone else's bedroom, you know, like, these were just things. But I don't know. Really, you could say you seem like a prep. It's not necessarily about being a prep. It's just about how tight knit you are. And that's kind of what it is. When people say, oh, I'm not going to get dirty, I don't like mud, which I don't. I mean, mud is only made for women and pigs, like that's it. You can say ATV and motocross and everything, but, um, them, that's, I'm pretty clean, I need to, I'd rather take a bubble bath. Just to let you know, I'm just gonna be truthful. So that's just one thing you got to understand. But so yeah, I mean, when you think about that, it happens to be clean. But um, so and as we get into high school, just going through that, I mean, I just really wanted to get in and get out. I mean, that was pretty much what it was. I mean, when people said, well, you should socialize and you should make friends, for me, it was just like, well, that's extra work. I mean, so you're saying you want me to get a job when I'm 15, you want me to join clubs, you want me to do sports, and you want me to, host parties for people and, pay for insurance. I mean, it's a lot more responsibility than what you really would have taken. And I was just learning that I have a considerable lazy streak. So, when you say, well, did you do Spanish club? Did you do math club? Did you do, church club? Did you do anything like this? It was just like, I mean, the old me would probably say, well, that's kind of cheese ball. But the new me would probably say, yeah, I would do it, but I'd probably only do it just for the the rewards. Like if I knew that like there were like if I knew that there were like girls there that I was talking to in class and they were going to be there, I'd probably do it. But I'm not just going to, take the chance and end up taking 2 hour, 30 minutes, an hour out of my life just because, some reason. But that's just how I've always been, as far as taking a chance, So needless to say, what I did was track. I said, I mean, really, that was pretty much what I did. And I think I did do like a couple other things, but well, I don't know. I actually didn't. But I mean, I did notice that sports took, it took extras. I mean, because you would have to go to these things, but you would still have to do the work. And it just, so that was something else. But, 8 years later, 10 years later, it's just like, really, what would you do if work offered these same things? Like if work said, well, you can, I mean, I'm sure that people do. I mean, you see people like in 40-Year-Old Virgin where they bring Steve Carell to their poker club, and it's like, he says, well, yeah, I'll do it, but, would you actually do it? I mean, because then you got to spend the gas money just to play a poker game, and it's like, well, what am I going to do? I mean, obviously, if you're in that position, go for it because they could probably help you out, but not. It's not in the sense. I mean, the internet's a beautiful thing. That's just the way that it is. I mean, it's not like you have to be so cautious all the time. I mean, you really shouldn't. But I feel like I'm talking to like like the 3% or something. I'm not. I'm just saying like I'm talking to the percent that's saying, well, I'm gonna hang out with my work friends because they invited me, and it's like you can just take it up to whatever way you want. I mean, really, I mean, it's not like you have to go to the go-kart racing just because they want you to go. I mean, you could say, well, I don't know. I mean, that's just a form of socializing. Now I'm getting in a little bit deeper. I don't really care. I mean, just you do whatever you want, and it just comes with what you're going to do. I mean, really, it's just fun with that decision of what you're going to spend your money on. That's kind of that's like the best part of owning a job is deciding what you're going to do with it. So I mean, because it's like, hey, I can get this table now. So, and yeah, I mean, really, it just that's kind of fun. But back to 10 years ago, I mean, really, the only other thing that I really kind of felt at the time was just a lack of television. And I noticed that I needed something because I did used to watch anime. So I felt like at that point I had gotten in, and I'll just admit it, like I read a certain manga, and the problem with it was just sometimes mangas are geared, and I've said this before, but I needed something a little bit more brutal. I mean, but I like Naruto, and like watching that, it reminded me, I would have said, if I were like 9 or something, I would have liked that quite a bit. But it just that's the only problem is you just have to like realize that. But I did read some of that manga that year, and I remember a certain volume where Haku dies, and I mean it hit like a string for me just because it was just in the sense of like, well, you understand that, I mean, it was different from like Dragon Ball or something because when people died they just said, oh, we'll wish you back to life, but this time they were actually gone for good, and it was like, well, hey, like that whole, if you read that whole section, volume 4 of the series, you'll see that it turns out that it's kind of a bittersweet ending. And I'm sure, like, I've read the whole first part 1 of Naruto at some point in my life, and I know that part 2 probably had more moments like that. I know it did, but just I mean, it just, that's something that brings out an extra little bit in you, and um it's not that I'm just being emotional, because I'm not. I mean, I'm just saying that it will, um there's not as many mangas that you realize, well, hey, these people are, they're going to die, and things are going to happen, and it's going to take place, and it's going to change. So I mean, that was just an extra thing that I went through that year, and I said, well, but the reason why I got out of the manga was because they took out the foul language, and sometimes they edited the blood and the sexual scenes. They just didn't keep them, and I was like, you're making this feel like it's for children. If you, it should just be in a booklet. It should be like, hey, you cannot read this unless you're over, ages 13 and up. A 13-year-old can take the word damn. So I mean, that was the reason, another reason why I quit. But that's just extra things. I mean, really, that's just what you got to say. So that was something else that I went through at the time. But yeah.